Hello, welcome to Orange Juice Rice. If we haven't met, my name is Lennon. I am behind the camera and I guess the screen for this channel. A little bit about myself. This is the second month I'm running this channel and actually got to 1,000 this morning, which was very exciting and a little bit like, oh wow, that's happening. But I'm an immigrant from China. I was born in Shanghai till I was 17 and then packed a luggage, went to Australia by myself for the next 15 years. And in my daytime, I am a product designer who just quit job 7 months ago, and then I moved to Amsterdam 3 months ago. So I'm still very fresh to Europe. And I started this channel, I guess, because I wanted to just document the trip a little bit. And I love taking photo anyway. And gradually, I think started this year, I just did more video shooting. And I just want to put them together. And it was a very nice feeling of almost archiving memory, go through them properly, make them videos, and then put it here. And this will be a slightly different video from all of the other travel logs. And if you are here for those travel logs, don't worry, I'm gonna upload more. I'm working on an Antwerp video in Belgium. That's gonna be released pretty soon. But if you are here because of maybe LinkedIn posts or someone shared a link about I gave this talk 2-3 weeks ago about Claude and product design, you are in the right place, and I'm gonna play the clip just in a little bit. And for people who actually come to the event, thank you so much. I think there were maybe 70 or 80 of you. We were doing it at Mira's office in Zuid, Amsterdam. And I am going to play the same talk, except for I am talking to a camera or screen. But I did include a little bit more demo on the things I've been building. And so there might be a little bit more value for you as well. And you can certainly grab all of the links from the slides. I'm not going to share the presentation just in case I have some sort of personal information in there. But you can, of course, just look at the screen and then grab the QR code. And maybe I just want to talk a little bit about tiny adventure, because you will probably see that on this channel. I am a firm believer of the concept of play and adventures. Certainly traveling to Japan or to New Zealand later last year were all like adventures. And I think, in fact, they are probably big adventures. But I think there are small adventures that we can take every day, like just going out, take photos and take some videos on the things that I really like. Like later, I think I'm gonna go out to a park, and then in Amsterdam West, which is kind of like a park I really like. And I'm really awkward because this is the first video I've ever made, I guess, talking to a camera. But at the same time, I do believe that like saying yes to a talk, because it might inevitably help me make a little bit more friends, just because I landed in Amsterdam, or I don't know, set up this YouTube channel, I think are all part of an adventure. And we almost need to maybe actively seek out adventure so our life is a little bit more fun in that way. And that's where the tagline Tiny Adventure comes. And if you are interested in why this channel is called Orange Juice Rice, it's just a direct translation of my Chinese name. And I thought it would be fun. And I knew I was gonna forget about something. I want to do a quick shout out to my friend Li Qing, who I went to The Hague together, I think 1.5 months ago. That was in fact the first video, proper video I uploaded to this channel. He is currently an engineer at GitHub, which is very cool. And then on his Amsterdam trip, he met up with his friend Ben, who works at Mira as a growth designer. And Ben was, in fact, the city ambassador for Claude in Amsterdam. And I guess just through chattings, maybe Li Qing mentioned my name, and then I connected with Ben, and he happened to be running this event. And so it was just friends kind of had this random opportunity. And on the day, Ben did tell me that if it weren't for like the speakers saying yes, he probably just wouldn't even have this event. So I think everything really just come together in a very random but interesting way. And on the night, there's also talk delivered by Winnie, a designer working at Simmons. And I think it's a consulting or agency side of that, who's based in Rotterdam, and then Mauricio, who's a principal designer at Mirror. And I enjoy their talk equally as well. It was a really interesting dynamic that I was talking about, I guess, from a personal angle. And then Winnie was sharing how, I guess, as a team or being part of a team, how do you utilize AI together? And Mauricio was going full, I think, just scientists almost, to talk about how he runs agents and stuff. And I certainly recommend kind of reaching out to them if you are interested more in that aspect. But that is it. Now I'm gonna play the actual clip that I recorded on Loom, and I don't really know how it's gonna play out. And again, it's all part of play. So yeah, I'll see you there. Hello. Welcome to the presentation section of the video. Yeah, I have my DJI in front of me. I have this little mic, and I think it's just mimicking talking to a live audience a little bit better. And I'm going to turn on the presentation mode and then allow Canva to send me like a remote control. And then basically I have this little app and it can help me go front or back of the slides. Anyway, let's get started. The title of my talk is called Designing My Life Downside Up with Claude. And if I haven't called you at the intro section of this video, hello, my name is Lennon. I'm currently a product designer at Remote and I'm based in Amsterdam. 1 year ago, I told my boss I'm actually gonna quit my job. And not only that, I want to move to Europe. And at the time, you can see at the bottom of the slides, I was in Melbourne, in Australia, and now I'm in Amsterdam, Netherlands. And so instead of, I guess, thinking my life is going to turn upside down, it's really downside up. But one of the major challenges, in fact, I have never visited Europe. And one of the common pattern of when I have a vague idea nowadays is, of course, just ask Claude. And so this presentation or the story will really be about me only having this very vague idea of what I want, plus a few things happen along the way and how Claude helped. So let's ask Claude, which country should I consider if I want to move myself to Europe? I've never been there as a product designer. And of course, Claude being very helpful, gave me 4 cities from 4 different countries. They're Berlin, Amsterdam, Lisbon, and London. So I applied some quick criteria. I've always felt like Berlin's too cool for me. I am wearing black, but I don't think I have enough cool black clothes in my wardrobe. Language might be a little bit of a barrier in Lisbon, and London might be a little bit too corporate. So Amsterdam feels like a good first pick, but I'm a person of science. I can't just believe the only answer that Claude gave me, right? So of course, I went, sought out, and asked Claude to analyze my astrocartography. And if you don't know what that is, you basically put in your birthday and your birthplace to this website, it gives you this graph. And then you throw it into Claude, it will then tell you which are the cities aligned with your energy. And of course, Amsterdam's on the list. And I guess if Claude has said it twice, it must be true, right? So Amsterdam it is. But in all seriousness, the city does provide a lot of good foundation. I'm notoriously bad at keeping a balance of work and life. And I think Netherlands really good at kind of creating a good baseline. There's 30% tax ruling here. And moving to Europe, a big goal for me is to actually travel. And the airport here is quite amazing. And language has not been really a barrier. And I think my friends were right when they told me that. So I've got a very vague plan, but I have my first target, which is moving to Amsterdam. What is the logical first step? Procrastination, of course, by traveling. Immediately after I left my job, I went on a road trip with my friends. We drove from Auckland all the way to Wellington, stopped at Hobbiton. Then after 10 days, went to Japan in winter, saw the heaviest snow I've ever seen in Hokkaido, which was incredible. And I even stopped by my hometown in Shanghai, and in the middle of the picture, that's actually the apartment I grew up with. And for context, I was born and raised in Shanghai, China, and I left the country by myself when I was 17 to Australia. And reality has a funny way of reminding you actually need a job, especially if I want to pull off this plan. Not only that, the complexity also lies in I need a sponsorship from the Netherlands. And if you have been looking for jobs in the past 6 to 12 months, you've all been handed this little job hunting pack. And you would have seen keywords like AI native, merge request, push code, MCP, and everyone needs to be a builder. And if I were to dumb it down and translate it for you, it's AI, 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 AI. And of course, panic. And so I think this was back in early February when I started looking for a job. I asked myself, do I actually know AI? And the answer is kind of a yes and no. Allow me to explain. So before I joined remote and on this being on this career break, I was working at Canva as a product designer on the search feature. My team looked after this little box sitting on the homepage. And of course, when AI entered the chat, which was end of 2024, leadership came to our team and asked, should we just replace it with an AI prompt box? And a little bit context on this box is actually 60% of Canva users rely on this search bar to get started, especially searching for templates. People will search for wedding invitation, birthday cards, and that's actually 144 million monthly active users at the time. And from 2 weeks of rapid user research, we found that our users were not ready for an entire AI replacement yet. And I want to emphasize on this was still in late 2024 and early 2025. I think even the power user is just getting started to get familiar with prompt box. And Canva as a product actually has more everyday user instead of power user. And so we kind of have to create a solution for that. And the solution was, drumroll please. Just a toggle. Very, very simple. Of course, we expanded it to make it more look like an AI prompt box in the AI mode. But essentially, we just add a little toggle, allow people to switch to the AI mode. And we split out the search scope to searching for your stuff and searching for Canva stuff. That's templates. And it looks very simple, but if you've worked at a bigger product, you know that a change like this is going to take a lot of effort, especially it's related with information architecture. And in fact, this was a big deal. The project itself was sponsored by founder. We had 13 weeks with 20 different teams to implement it and essentially re-architect Canva. We had to launch it at the LA Canva Create in 2025. And this project got me a principal role that shows, I guess, the value and the impact of the project itself. But when I look at the job ads, again, back in February, here are a bunch of things I extracted it out. And I want to go through that with you. Was I prototyping with AI? Just a little bit, but very limited because it was still quite early. Every company was still trying to rush their design system to get it, I guess, MCP ready. Was I pushing code to prod? Definitely not. I don't want to piss off my engineers. And were we leveraging design system? Nope. I'm actually leading the team to break it. And was I actually building AI features? Not really. I was working on the discoverability aspect of it and creating an entrance for it. And so for this grand question of, was I living and breathing AI? Nope. And then you look at these job ads, and I pick one example from this product that I really like called Craft. I think they are based in Belgium. You can see the first line of their job ad is, you must have personal projects built with or assisted by AI tools. And we want to see how you think with these tools, not just use them. And so I thought to myself, fine, I'll build an AI project with Claude. If you can't beat it, join it, right? And I had to look at what data do I have, what can I build? And one of the facts is I have very, very long chat history with my friends on Instagram. And if you've done search on WhatsApp or Instagram, you'll know that, for example, search for your first chat is a nightmare unless you know exactly the keyword or when that was. And at the same time, I found out Meta actually allows you to download these even in JSON format. It's just behind a slightly complicated steps, but it is doable. So I thought to myself, what if I build a tool to help me recap what my friends and myself were talking about? So what were we talking about? Shortened to 3WTA. And so I throw this into Claude as, hey, Claude, help me build this thing. And not only that, I just provided the JSON file, which containing the chat messages. And I found that a very effective way of building the tool because Claude from the very start understands the data schema. And on the left-hand side, you can see it generated this artifact, give me total number of messages, how many days, a little bit of a summary. And on the top right, you can see a little button saying summarizing February. And that's actually a AI button that helped me recap the topics and the milestone of our chat. And I was so AI built at the time. I just showed this artifact directly to a CEO of a product on our first chat in an interview. To this day, I wonder what she probably was thinking when I showed her that. But of course, that's not enough. And so on interview number 3, I showcased a little onboarding process I built. So I'm uploading a chat history. I'm choosing who I am. And this now tells me that when was our first chat, how many messages I actually exchanged with Sophia, and then a bit of a heat map showing kind of how intense our chat was. And this is fake data here. And I thought it would be really fun to almost help user create this unwrapping exercise, because it does feel special to kind of understand or see the history of your chat with your friend. But I wasn't particularly happy about the design aspect of it, because Claude essentially just helped me generated all of the design and made a lot of choices on color scheme, on typography and everything. And so on interview number 4, I then showed the same company 4 different interaction prototype I built. And because I'm recording this in a video, I can kind of play around with a little bit. So let me go into the browser. So I built 4 interaction prototype, and what they essentially are things I kind of want to play with. For example, the first one, I was just thinking about what if I can select a bunch of messages and just highlight them and later use them for something else. So I built this little kind of jumpy animation. I created some placeholder for like annotation, and you can even edit it. So I can add a little bit more. And the second one then is to take that onto more of, I guess, the desktop version. And I can select all of them, I can highlight, and then now you can see them getting added to the left-hand side of the screen. And I can do another one, highlight, and I can jump kind of between them. And of course, I can remove that. I'll jump back. And then also at the same time, it was possible to kind of building these little hidden button for me to try different interaction pattern. For example, this one is a bottom sheet. And if I click on it again, it becomes this almost like a right-hand side click menu. And the third one was more focusing on, I guess, this calendar that I talk about. And really what it is it's just a heat map telling you on this particular day, you chat a lot more comparing to other days. And I tried some really wacky version of that. And if I click on that again, both of these versions didn't work. So I eventually just reverted back to this calendar. And finally, a little bit more of a complete prototype for user to upload data, show a very dramatic animation to open it, and then you can even search. And one of the fun thing I did was to create like a little empty search state that all of the messages just drop onto the bottom of the screen. You can actually search normally, and then I was kind of exploring what does these would look like. Again, I'm a search designer. Cool. I feel pretty good about adding these little interactions into that, I guess, to showcase that I do have ability to do design instead of just telling Claude to say, hey, help me generate a bunch of design. And so on the final interview, I reunited with the CEO, and then I was able to show her a more complete version 2, if you will, of 3WTA. I even built a little fake mode, so I'm not exposing private messages when I'm doing demos. I can directly jump back to the first day when we chatted, and then to the last messages. Again, I can see the heat map. I can go to a very particular day. And then I can even search. And I now have a little bit of a search suggestion. So let's search for recipe. And the user can kind of go in there and then browse different search results. From version 1 to version 2, so from the onboarding and all the way to, I guess, a more polished version 2, I documented it in Notion, took around 4 weeks with a bit of break in between. And the reward I got from that was I got ghosted by this company. And eventually when they came back, which was, I think, 3 or 4 weeks after, the HR just told me that they didn't have the headcount to start with. And I was obviously gutted. But I did unlock a new design process in that. And let me move the mouse away. And it started with doing a lot of brain dumping. And I do this at my current job a lot as well, is instead of just directly opening Figma, I tend to write everything in my brain. And usually there are very noodly, just all jumbling together. What you are seeing on the screen is from version 1 to version 2. What are the contexts? What are the things I think haven't gotten there, and what I want to do for version 2? And so even before we are building, Claude has the context of what I'm thinking. And I want to talk a little bit about source of truth for designers. I always remember when I was working at an agency in Melbourne, which I adore, called Today, my design director, Jacob, told me he always believes whatever design tool we were using, whether that's Sketch or Figma, these pixel-based tools are always just painting an ideal version or ideal painting of the design we actually want to ship. What eventually will end up in the web browser will always look a little bit different. And throughout this process, I found out a new tool called Paper. And what's different for Paper, and it's the screen on the right-hand side, is its canvas are actually just rendered HTML and CSS. If the canvas itself are code, Claude will have a much better time of understanding, communicating, and even rendering screen for you, versus on the left-hand side, a screen in Figma. And not only that, Paper also have a plugin called Snapshot. What it allows you to do is to select any DOM or elements on a web page, and then you can just paste that onto the canvas. For example, in this case, I'm copying my little heat map calendar and then paste that into Paper. I can just grab any production elements and then just modify it on the spot. And then it can then, I think at the time it was called round trip, you can round trip back into the Claude and say, hey, I want to make these changes. And again, because they are code, so it's much faster. And similarly, Claude provides a similar mechanism to help you refine elements on the things you've been building. What you're seeing on the screen is an older version of Claude. Co-work was still a separate mode at the time, but you can see it has a little preview browser, and you can select different div or elements on the screen and just reference that to tell Claude, hey, I want to change how the date and year label look. Eventually, my design process kind of got evolved, and it has a lot to do with writing down in Notion, talking with Claude, still doing a little bit mapping and planning in Figma, especially Figma has components, which Paper at the time doesn't. Maybe it has now. And then go into this little loop among these three different tools, Paper, Claude, and Notion. And on the right-hand side, you can see I love just keeping a little trail of my development. I do this at my work. Every prototype I've been built has these little receipts of what are the steps I took. And I've written a little article on more details of how this design process pan out. If you're interested, you can go and have a read. At the end of the day, it did help me get a job at Remote, or I'd love to believe that, because I did share a lot of these AI prototypes throughout the interview process, and I found a typo on my slide. But it's like driving the high-speed car on highway for a little while. I can't just suddenly hit the brakes. I've been like really working with AI every single day, and still felt this need of keeping up with it after landing the job with Remote. And I think by this part of the presentation, I've already established I'm sort of a documentation nerd. And not only that, I have an incredible amount of data of myself. But at the same time, the internet has even more AI things thrown to my way and to overwhelm myself. So I wondered if I can build a little tool to help funnel and narrow down information according to my actual needs. And this is where I came across this little tweet. I'm not going to read this tweet, but what it does is it promises with a very simple folder structure and a few files on your machine plus Claude, you can build a knowledge base for yourself. So I was intrigued. Let's break it down. So there are 3 folders this tweet suggested. The first folder is called raw, and this is a folder containing files or data that basically you have. And the file doesn't have to be a text file, but let's just run with that. A good example will be, well, I have a decade of digitized journal of myself. And then with the raw data, we pass through Claude and ask it to extract some facts from these data. So with a decade of journal, it's very easy for Claude to just scan through and generate me a timeline. And with all of the milestones, so from 2010 to 2026, every year that I've written something, it can pull out, hey, this is what happened that year on a very high level. And this is a very interesting folder, wiki, because it kind of acts as a temporary memory for AI. If you've worked with a large quantity of files, or it doesn't even to be large, then maybe you have 20 or 30 of them, you know that every single time if you ask a question, AI have to go through all of them, especially if they have a lot of information. It will hallucinate, or the accuracy will just dwindle. And in this wiki folder, what it does is basically extract out enough facts that AI can just quickly scan. And if it can just refer information from this, it can just do that. And only if it needs more information, it can then go back to raw folder to dig a little bit deeper. And so it's trying to use a very simple way to fix this short to midterm memory. But of course, it's not perfect. But other things that good example of what wiki or what extracted facts from journal could be what is Claude's observation of the value I hold, my interests, tastes, and even pattern. And the third folder is called output. In this folder are all the answers to the question you want to ask Claude. A very good example would be I have journal, I have some facts about myself throughout the years. I can easily ask Claude, hey Claude, when I move to Amsterdam, what are the music and movies I can explore? And Claude can just generate this little list for me. But in fact, I've watched all of these before I even made it. Another good example on coding or project side is I have 3WTA, the project. I have all the code and documentation, and most of them are AI generated anyway. Every day I go to Twitter to collect a little bit inspiration and see what's happening. So I can put these two into the raw folder. And then Claude can quickly scan through it and pull out the iteration and milestone of the product I've been building. It can even trace it back to, hey, on this day, this specific tweet actually influenced you to make certain decisions. And of course, I can ask questions like, hey, Claude, what should I build next? Or help make all these architectural decisions for the product that I have absolutely no idea. And I think really interesting for product designers or product builders, it can actually help with portfolio. A good example is I just asked Claude to generate me this HTML artifact, which is essentially the iteration timeline of 3WTA. And I was able to just pull this out and then show one of the interviewer, here is a timeline of this product. I built multiple versions of it. And then I can click on each of them to show a little bit more details. And while I guess managing this process, I started to finding it a little bit hard to just rely on Obsidian, which is a tool that I started exploring in this process. But Obsidian requires a subscription for me to read or look through some of these things on my phone. And I don't want to pay for another subscription. So I built a little reader for myself based on this little structure. And what this reader does is to almost repeat this newly established process for myself that include on any given day I might brain dump my thoughts and then I might collect external things. These are raw, or I call them input, and then I'll ask some questions based on them that goes into output as answers. And then at the same time, Claude can keep updating my wiki, and I ask Claude to generate a digest every single day to help me retrace back. And if I show you the real app, so this was April 27th. I just used this reader for a month, and then you can see on this particular day, I was thinking about 3WTA as a portfolio case study, which kind of leads to this talk actually, and what my thinking has been evolving related to the product. And then it helped me create some wiki items. These are basically 3 different products I found related to 3WTA I'm building, and then updated some wikis and output. And throughout this process, what I found really interesting was I was able to directly pull the calendar component I built, or the heat map for the initial 3WTA, and just pull that onto the reader app itself. And you can see on the left-hand side, it basically shows the intensity of chat. But on the right-hand side, I feel like that's showing how much I'm overthinking on any given day. And you can see probably the 7th of April, I was thinking the hardest and doing the most things. This idea of personal software has been flowing around for a while. And throughout this process, I started seeing that I can just build myself stuff and make them useful in the way I want them. And again, I wrote a little article on that. I know this could be a slightly abstract section. You might be wondering, what is it, how to set it up? And hopefully this article can answer that. And I apologize if it feels a little bit wonky. But then end of April, start of May, the actual migration needed to start. And I suddenly didn't have a lot of time staring at AI every day. And this was when I was doing the talk, which was almost 3 weeks ago. And at the time, it happened to mark 3 months landing in Amsterdam from Melbourne. And one of the realization I had at that point, or even right now, is, wow, I really didn't miss the intense use of AI and try to keep up with it every single day. In fact, shameless plug, I've been building a little YouTube channel to kind of pulling all of the video clips I've shot during my travels. Play a little preview of an episode I was editing at the time but has already released. And of course, even building this YouTube channel, I was still using Claude to ask for different things like generating descriptions or what sort of tag should I use and to come up with strategies. But I think the most important things was this was such a manual and very, very slow process. This is an example of one of the episodes that I was showing for Sapporo. It was a 3-day trip and this is just one day. And I think it took me at least maybe 5 to 6 hours to go through each clip, color grade them, make them into sequence and do some storytelling and then put music into that. And you know what? It is oddly liberating. So this has been a story about only have a very rough idea of what I want, which is moving to Europe and find a job to sponsor me in the Netherlands. But do it anyway, I guess, with the help of Claude. Or if I put a clickbaity version, it should be probably the YouTube thumbnail or the title, 7 cool things you can try today to pull off a relocation crossing the globe. And what is talk or presentation by a product designer without a little retro? So let's talk about the reflection of this entire process, a downside of retro, if you will. First up is, I truly don't think anybody has it figured out. If they seem like they do, I think they're pretending, just like myself, or I think maybe you have to do that to a point, and that's okay. I've always believed the power of play, and it doesn't matter which era we are in. And I think if I look back at the entire process of migrating myself again, first from Shanghai to Australia and then from Australia to Netherlands, it was just seeking different things I wanted to have a play, whether that's building an AI product or maybe travel and see how I can capture travel and do a little bit storytelling. And remember to unplug. I certainly think I effectively unplugged, but more forced by I have to physically move. And I don't really think there is truly keeping up with AI. Maybe very similarly to when apps in Apple ecosystem started to become a thing. Everyone was trying to chase or creating apps. And I do believe in the value of making manual effort to slow down on the things you care and love. And that is it. Hopefully no AI was heard in the process of creating this presentation. I didn't mention this during my actual talk, but the entire slide, I didn't really use AI. I picked the fonts, picked the color scheme, I tweaked a lot, and it was so fun for me as a designer because I love looking at pretty things. And I've certainly tried using AI generating presentation, especially for the case study I've done in my interview. But again, at the end of the day, I found that I still want control over the narrative, and then I wanted to deliver it in a very personal and my way. And I don't think AI is hitting that mark just yet. And thank you so much for coming to this talk. I hope you enjoyed that. And you can find all the links either through stopping at the frame, scan the QR code, or you can go to my portfolio website, which is actually just a Notion page. Thank you again. Hey, you stay at the Easter egg section. Thank you so much for watching to this point. I guess there was one thing that I really find surprising when I was putting together these slides. Because I worked at Canva for 4 years, it's really easy for me to kind of just ignore the product itself and feel like everything is broken, especially the search feature that I was working on. I'm going to move myself a little bit to the left. And when I was putting these slides together, I really felt like it is genuinely a really good product. I found myself having a much kinder eye. And one of the things that I got really excited, and I knew it was released before I left, which is the work from the 3D Elements team, is you can now drag in 3D elements in Canva. And what that allows you to do is you can have this little globe things, and then you can just grab it. And then I was able to use that and then place it on the screen and then to show you. I didn't need to search for like a globe that's specifically pointing Europe in the middle or pointing Australia in the middle. I thought that was incredible. And my friend Sugi worked on components and his team together. And I was able to use components in this as well. For example, this is a little component I use to call out different use cases on the pages. And then I believe there is a little component panel here. Yep, and I'm going to move myself to the right. And then you can see components here, and you can drag it onto the page and then even change the label inside of that. And if you change a color in one of these things, everything will get changed. And let's revert back. And that's kind of it. I still love using the product itself, and I thought it would be fun to maybe just share that. That's it. And we're going to Antwerp. Yay.